even though our harvest numbers do tend to taper off, our hunter numbers do as well. So some of that is just because there's aren't as many people hunting later in the season.
Yeah, people move on to
they got other stuff going on.
Yep. Deer rut's the biggest thing that probably pulls people out. It stops me from going.
Absolutely.
Right. And getting up that early every single day too.
It
kind of starts to wear you out.
You have a history of saying some derogatory things about deer hunting on your podcast. As I recall. So.
No one should listen to the episode called "I Make Gumbo." I had a guy I talked to the other day. He had a wetland management question, and we chatted for a bit. Really nice fella from Wisconsin, and he's like, "I've been working my way back through all your podcasts from the beginning towards the end." And I'm like, just so you're aware, we've refined it as we've gone along.
You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
I want to start out this week by thanking our every week listeners. You know who you are. You never miss a single episode of the Foul Weather Podcast. In this episode, we meet with Paul Hess, wildlife biologist at Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge in Western New York. At the beginning, we talk a bit about pintails and the change in the bag limit. If you have not heard about this, this will be instituted in 2025-2026 hunting season. So not this year, but under the liberal framework, when we are in a liberal framework in the Pacific, Central, and Mississippi flyways, we will be at 3 pintails as a daily bag. For the Atlantic flyway, likely because we shoot less pintails than other places, we will be at a fixed 3 bag limit for pintails. Oh, it's a whole new world, folks. So how can this happen with a declined pintail population? The point is that harvest, we've talked about this a lot in this podcast, harvest is not what drives these populations. And even under a restrictive season, we have not seen pintail populations rebound. So what is it about? It's about habitat. It's not about harvest. And so we can't continually keep sending pintails back to breeding grounds where there's no habitat, right? So you can produce them, and if you don't shoot them and they go back, they got no place to go to breed. So this is actually exactly like where we're at with mallards right now in quite a different numbers game situation, where we've got a dry prairie. Things are looking better. We'll get into that a little bit later on this summer. Things are looking better. But we got a dry prairie, and if you don't shoot these birds and you send them back, it's not like they just hang out for generation after generation after generation and survive and then eventually produce ducks. They die. Ducks don't live long. And so all the folks out there that continually keep pushing, oh, it's logic. It's logic to just not shoot ducks, because then if there's more ducks, they produce more ducks. That's actually not how it happens. And so the model that we have for pintails exactly speaks to that we cannot stockpile ducks. So whatever ducks that population of pintails is producing, we might as well take them. So where should our focus be? Where should our energy be? Habitat. Whatever is affecting the numbers of acres in grass and the numbers of wetlands that we can sustain on this continent and beyond, that's what we should be focused on for wetland-dependent species in totality, but in this case, pintails. So we've got a wonderful interview with Paul Hess, hunter conservationist from Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge, coming up to detail their habitat management as well as hunt management on that refuge. So please stick with us. The Farmland Group has handled over $400 million in farm sales across the Mid-South and recently added some spectacular wildlife management expertise, particularly for waterfowl and waterfowl hunting, to their diverse portfolio. Maybe you want to get started with a new duck hunting property, or maybe you want to enhance an existing property to peak performance. Look no further than the Farmland Group. With licensed agents and affiliated relationships, the Farmland Group is ready to assist clients across the states of Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. You've been thinking about it for years. No need to put it off anymore. Build your duck club dream with the Farmland Group. Their expertise doesn't stop at sales. They also have extensive lending relationships with the biggest farmland and recreational lenders in the country, as well as a staff appraiser that can assist in helping value your property. Find the Farmland Group today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. At the beginning of this interview, we do a little impromptu discussion with Paul about pintails and hunting on the Refuge over the last few years. Then we dive into what it's like to be a wildlife biologist on a national wildlife refuge, how hunt management works, and how habitat management makes all that happen.
I'm just going to start with banter about pintails. Like, did you know that was coming, the pintail stuff?
It's funny, I didn't. A friend of mine he's my lifelong hunting friend. Like, we've been hunting together forever.
That's Steve, right, or not?
Well, it's another guy. Actually.
Another guy?
My buddy Ed. So Steve is another one, actually. He sent me a text the other day saying, 3 pintails or woohoo, and I was like, I had no idea what he was talking about. So
yeah.
I had to look it up, actually. And so, so I didn't know about it until you sent me, the email.
So, you didn't? Okay,
no.
Cool.
Well, I mean, other than what he said, but I didn't look
said.
at the reason behind it. He just shot me a quick text, and I was actually, where was I? I was traveling across the country, actually, with my son, so I didn't have time to really look into it, but
yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, so it's neat, like, Pacific Central Mississippi are under a liberal framework, and I don't know why Atlantic Flyway is just fixed at 3. Which seems crazy, maybe because our harvest isn't enough to ever do anything, and we have, I would say, just less birds in general, and less opportunities for other stuff that 3 really helps us out. So the other thing too is you helped us get some of those pintail wings for stable isotope stuff, and I am an author on that paper with Jackson Cusack from Western University used to be University of Western Ontario, where Dave Ankney and folks were, where I did my doctorate as well. So that's where that stable isotope lab is now, Keith Hobson's lab. And the pintails in the Great Lakes region, which are probably the same as us for the most part, and we contributed a lot of the pintails anyway, are actually mostly coming from James Bay lowlands and Quebec.
Oh, okay.
Which is what we thought was going on, right? Which is pretty cool. But I didn't think that was a thing because, was it 2-3 years ago? I don't know if you guys had it, but like there were hardly any pintails at Montezuma, and that was when the prairies where the pintails are was wicked dry, right? And we didn't see the numbers of juveniles or anything like that. So I was like, well, maybe more of them are coming from the mid-continent. Because I think that eastern population must be like relatively stable, Yeah. But do you have a sense of, like, when you guys open, you usually have a ton of pintails here, right?
Yeah, usually, especially more recently than maybe a few decades ago. It seems like more recently we've got larger numbers of pintails, and moving in right around the beginning of the season, that late September, early October period.
Okay.
And the last several seasons, particularly the last couple, seems like pintails are the lion's share of the birds we almost have here. I mean, at times you're pulling your hair out while you're hunting because there's just nothing else around.
Well, that same thing happened to you in Montezuma,
yeah, I had
right?
same experience in Montezuma.
Yeah, and I had that like 3 or 4 times because we got in a bunch there till they moved on and we were into mallards. It was like you get your one pintail and you're done.
Yep. Yeah, they're just you're kind of finished, and it gets to be hard because of course you don't want to make a mistake, and so you're quick. You're kind of slow on the draw when that one mallard happens to be in with some pintails or a gadwall or a widgeon or something like that. Yeah. So you end up passing up a lot of birds that you maybe wouldn't have otherwise because you don't want to shoot that second pintail.
Well, I know the first time, I think it was the first time Sarah and I got in here, we shot our pintails and then we were decoying like flocks of 30, 50. Yeah. It was insane. We only came out with like 9 ducks on opening day, and it wasn't because of bad shooting. It was because there wasn't anything else to shoot at.
Right. Yeah.
But like I wonder this is interesting, under 3 pintails, like if you get your 3 pintails, well, there's not a lot of mallards around at that time, typically near opener, but you're not shooting 4 mallards.
Right.
So there's gonna be like a bag trade-off type thing.
Yeah, sure.
So we've actually got a student, Delta Waterfall just funded us for its green wings, gadwall, widgeon, and they wanted to throw canvasbacks in to look at origination of birds up and down the Atlantic coast. mostly like mid-Atlantic and south. Those folks want to know where their ducks are coming from, right? So it's a stable isotope project. But we're also going to dig into the wing bee, the bag, like individual days bags, and when it was 4 mallards, and then 2, and then 4.
Oh, yeah.
When it was 2, what else were we shooting? Like when you're not shooting your mallards, what are you shooting more black ducks? Are you shooting more widgeon? Like what's taking it on the chin? Because people just move on to like the next thing. It's like duck hunters aren't just going to be like, oh, I'm done.
Right.
Like
yeah.
they're just going to pick on the next other bird.
Yeah, I think most of them.
We've even moved to like shooting longtail ducks now, and like it seems to like the pressure just constantly shifts. If you take something away, it's not like duck hunters are like, well, I guess I'm just a deer hunter now. That just doesn't seem to happen.
No, they don't generally do that. They'll find other birds, and it's nice in a place like this, especially early in the season. You've got other options.
For pintail.
For other species, just a variety of species around. It's not like when you're hunting maybe in field hunting in December or something like that. It's going to be black ducks and mallards, maybe the odd pintail. But you're not going to get teal and widgeon and some of the other stuff, ringnecks, things like that. So it's nice to have those other things around.
So your early ducks are here. There's some mallards, then they leave, then you have mallards. But you guys just kind of decline from the beginning on, don't you?
Yeah, generally speaking, we don't see a big migration push like in November, and that some of the science suggests maybe that's shifting a bit later. But we generally don't see that. It's not real obvious anyway. I'm sure we get some migration, little pulses of migration, but for the most part, we'll see a good buildup, variety of species, lots of birds, a lot of the gray ducks, the pintails, and widgeon, teal, a lot of teal in that sort of that late September, early October period, and then the season will open, and it's just kind of a slow progression. It depends on the year and the weather, obviously, but in general, if you just look at our harvest from day to day, and we only hunt 3 days a week here. You'll see kind of just a general decline in the take throughout the hunting, the first split of the hunting season anyway. So so we occasionally you'll get a weather event that might bring in. We certainly have mallards here. It doesn't make it sound like we don't have any mallards. We certainly have quite a few mallards, and we get some black ducks. And then as the season progresses, they're a larger percentage of the birds that we have here, while some of these other species sort of move farther south.
You guys were in the dumpster last year late, though. I kept just looking at the kill board.
Last year was a little slow towards the end. I think it was mostly weather related. I think, when you only hunt 3 days, and you only hunt half days, a lot depends on the kind of weather you have on the actual hunt day. So of course, most hunters realize that, what this whole podcast is about, these broad weather patterns that move birds on larger weather systems. But that's the 3 things that I generally say make waterfowl hunting good or bad are, you gotta have birds, which you need to have kind of these broad weather systems that are moving birds around. You gotta have decent habitat, place to hunt. But then also the day you actually go out to hunt has to be kind of a ducky day. I mean, it doesn't have to be
reasonable weather,
but I mean, you don't want it to be 75 and dead calm. I mean, it helps if you've got some decent weather while you're actually out there hunting. So that makes a big difference when you're only hunting a few days a week. I think it can really change what the harvest looks like for the whole season.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, it was just mild last year. I mean, our season's closed, and we still had birds that hadn't shown up yet from Ontario, right? So that was by far the worst duck season, I think, weather-wise for everybody. Last year. So it wasn't a great year to start a podcast about duck migration. That's for sure.
Exactly.
But it helped people understand maybe a little bit more of like where were they at. And the biggest thing, and we just did this interview with Josh Osborne, who flies the surveys on the Illinois and Mississippi River, and he said the same thing, and Heath Hagee said the same thing with Fish and Wildlife Services, that they were just kind of everywhere. Like there was no major concentration of ducks in any one place, which is unusual. Usually there's some type of Missouri, or they make it to Arkansas, or Chesapeake Bay gets them on the Atlantic coast, or we get them. Like we'll be really piled up with them, but that just never happened last year, I don't think.
Yeah, so last year for us, it was actually interesting. Last year, I think overall it was probably a milder winter than the previous year, but we actually held birds longer the previous year because we have this sort of I don't know, anomaly for us necessarily, but just sort of the way the weather works here, or the way the birds work, is if you get 3-ish days of ice, we kind of lose our birds. Like there's no place for them to go close by. They have to kind of go farther away. So there's no of course, Lake Ontario and Lake Erie aren't that far away, but
they're far enough.
They're far enough, and they're kind of in the wrong direction.
You have no rivers, you have no big lakes for them to bump to, then come back.
Exactly. So what happened last season is we did get some cold weather sort of in November, late November, that sort of pushed most of our birds out of here. And then it actually got really mild. Like early December was just unbelievably warm, for us.
Yep.
And so everybody was thinking there'd still be a lot of birds around, but they had already left. And some birds actually did finally come back, so that there was some shooting into that second split, late into the December period, into that second split. But the previous year, we never really got that 3-day freeze, and so we were able to actually keep birds and hunters actually right until I think the season closed on either the 1st of January or the 31st of December that year.
You hunted all the way through.
We had people almost. I think the last day we had like one person, but we had froze up that day. But we were after Christmas even we were still have people coming out.
And I've never come out here after opener.
Yeah.
I've never even gotten picked for the second weekend. It's always been the first weekend. We can talk about it.
Consider yourself lucky.
It's insane. I mean, I don't even know how it keeps happening. I don't even know what I did last year for opener. Was I was here.
You were here.
I was here with my friend Gary from like Bloomfield.
Yep, right.
Area.
Yep.
Yeah. We got the last pick of all the draws. Oh, because you were over by my house at Montezuma.
Yep, I was over here.
And I was over here hunting. And yeah, you weren't even there, but like we had like 25 reservation spots, I think.
I think there was, for the
and
draw,
we got picked last, and like there was one chip left in the can, and I made sure I'm like that it was our number. You know what I mean? Because I feel like did you even put our number in there?
Right.
And we picked a spot that it was the walk maybe that people didn't want to do. But I was very surprised. We actually, if you looked at the kill board, we actually shot better than almost everybody else. And that friend of mine, he doesn't hunt, but like he the last time he duck hunted was with me here 3 years ago. We duck hunted in college and stuff. But when my wife can't make it, when Sarah can't make it for opener, I'll take him. He always gets second fiddle. You don't not take your wife on opening day. There'd be a domestic in the house if that was the case. But he shoots really well, like insanely well. Yeah, he shoots insanely well, though. It's funny. He just like picks his gun up and bangs away, and he's fine. He had a bum knee, though. Like I didn't realize how thick that muck was going into that spot.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, we're gonna go in here. You're just gonna take your time with it.
Yeah, I think that is a nice area. Actually, I know we changed the stands recently, the numbers, which
don't give any stand numbers on here, because if I put this on, I don't want people to be like, you blew up my spot, man.
But yeah, that particular spot is quite a long walk, just on dry ground, and then a bit of a haul through.
There's it's a little further off the berm, but it's a nice flyway. It seems to pick up birds from lots of different angles.
You're kind of out in the middle of it. That's hence the long walk.
But what'd we shoot? We shot wood ducks, widgeon, mallard, a ringneck out of the blue, and a nice pintail too, actually.
Cool.
So it was kind of a neat bag with. I got a great picture with the dog, and then a pile of ducks, obviously. But I mean, this is something you don't do. Count your ducks correctly. Because we were at our limit, and I'm like, we got one more bird. And we hunted for like another 40 minutes, and nothing wanted to work. It was like it had died. I was like, I went back and looked at him. I'm like, whoa, man, we're done. But it was so fast and furious, and in your head you're keeping count, and you're looking at them, and there was like one buried down there.
Yeah, right. And they're not always. Sometimes you've got some birds, he's got some birds. If you don't keep them all together, it gets a little confusing.
I'm like, how many birds do you have over there?
Right, exactly.
Go. Yeah, we're done. So that was fun. Folks, we're talking with Paul Hess, who's the wildlife biologist at Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge today on the podcast. And Paul's been a great, I'd say, research partner with us, and runs a great refuge here as far as habitat management and kind of hunt management. But Paul, you haven't been here your whole life. What's the evolution? I want to say, I know you were with like DEC, you were over at Montezuma. You might have been with ducks at one time too. So what's your full background on getting to this position?
Well, so I went to school at College of Environmental Science and Forestry, actually, where you teach.
Oh, you went to ESF?
Yep.
Okay.
So I got my bachelor's degree there. And
So this is what's good about being friends with people, but not having all the conversations.
Right.
You actually find stuff out when you interview
Right.
them that you didn't know.
So so I got a 4-year degree in wildlife ecology with wildlife management kind of focus, and then since then I did what a lot of people do after college. Did a lot of seasonal work. I was fortunate to be able to pretty much keep working for the whole time, but a lot of seasonal jobs. So a couple of the jobs I had during that period really sort of put my focus more onto waterfall management, waterfall population dynamics, that kind of stuff. I worked very early on in that period at Northern Prairie Wildlife Research Center out in North Dakota. I was actually working in western Minnesota, but the facilities in North Dakota.
Yep.
And that's back when they were doing a lot of work on mallard research. Then it was a small unit management project, I think it was called, where they were doing these areas on the landscape that they would actually fence, and they were looking at predator control, keeping predators out of those areas. I was just out of college, so a lot of that was like way beyond anything I was thinking of. My job was literally just to catch hen mallards, put radio transmitters on them, and then follow them around for the whole summer. That was literally what I did all summer long, so it was great. I really enjoyed that. There was a whole other group of people that were doing behavioral studies on these mallards as well. So just kind of documenting what they did all day long, just following them around. So it was neat. There was a lot of different research going on. Again, I was just kind of focused on the one part. But so that was one of the jobs I had. Another job I had during that period was working with New York State Department of Environmental Conservation at the Cayuga-Tompkins Cooperative Hunting Area.
Yeah.
So that's an area in the Finger Lakes where private landowners sort of put their land into this program, and the DEC actually sort of runs the hunt program there. So it's a lot of deer hunting, small game. They put out pheasants there, that kind of thing. But at the time, there was a lot of goose hunting going on down there as well. So again, sort of my interest in goose hunting started there. So those were two jobs that were, kind of got me going down to the waterfall.
Now, you were already a hunter at this point, or was it something you picked up during school?
No, I was already a hunter.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad used to take us out hunting. He was mostly a deer hunter, but we had a relative who lived on one of the larger lakes in central New York, and so we would go up there. He would take my brother and I up there a few times every season, and it was just a shore blind, kind of typical, birds coming from one end of the lake, or you come and go into the other end of the lake, and if you happen to be in between, and maybe you get lucky. And so it was all mallards, black ducks, maybe the odd ringneck or something like that, maybe a bufflehead or a golden eye, something like that. So, so that was sort of that was kind of started my waterfowl hunting. But what really got me into waterfowl hunting actually was one of my friends who you and I were talking about a little bit earlier. He took me up to one of the big wetland management areas in the St. Lawrence Valley for the first time, and that was a life-changing experience as far as my waterfowl hunting life goes, because it was incredible. It was unlike anything I had experienced before. Paddle out in a canoe, being in the gigantic marsh, and you've got a crazy variety of birds, not even just ducks, just birds in general, just flying around. And
you're still doing that.
Yeah,
you still do that.
Exactly. I get paid to do it sometimes now, not the hunting part of it, but to paddle through the marsh and just love it. So, so that was really, really eye-opening, just the variety of species. That was back when bag limits were only 3 birds, so you didn't spend a ton of time. Well, I couldn't shoot straight. I still don't shoot that well, but so I was out there longer than maybe somebody else, but it was a lot of fun. And so I really got to see what that was all about. So those jobs were important, and then the hunting experience was important in the previous jobs, and then I worked for the New York State waterfowl biologist as a technician, and that got me a little more involved in the population dynamics stuff of waterfowl management, and going to tech section meetings, interacting with people from different states within the flyway, also the provinces of Canada. They all have representatives on that board or that team. And I was real impressed just with the amount of science and research and stuff that went into how population dynamics work and how season setting happens. And there's still some art to it. It's not all exact, but like all biology, there's no real exact science with biology. There's always an art to it, but very impressive. A lot of smart folks working on that stuff. So it was really interesting. So those two things, those jobs and those hunting experiences early in life kind of shaped me into the waterfowl biologist and hunter that I am today.
And then real quick after that, was it ducks, Fish and Wildlife Service at Montezuma, and then here?
Yeah, so actually it was, those 10 years, a lot with DEC, a few other jobs around the country. Got this job here.
Oh.
Worked for, I don't know, about 8 or 9 years. Went out to Michigan, worked for DU for just for almost 2 year and a half-ish. And then actually I was fortunate to come back here and get my old job back, which is pretty amazing, actually.
That's pretty wild. I didn't know you worked here, left it, because this place is special, and we'll talk about that. But nobody should ever come hunt here after they listen to this podcast either. Like, I feel like I'm going to get hate emails from my friends about, like, blowing places up. But there's great places everywhere.
Oh, sure.
And there's good things about this place, and there's things that, like, people can show up from out of town and it can be just a bust.
It's like hunting anywhere else. Same, some days are good and some days aren't.
Yeah. So we're mostly going to talk about your, duck habitat management and the public hunting here and how that all works. But like most biologists, you wear a lot of hats, maybe some more hats than you want to sometimes.
Right, sure.
But beyond ducks at Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge, like, what are the other species that y'all kind of really focus on? Is there another group of birds or mammals, or like what's the daily type stuff that you end up focusing on beyond ducks?
So the refuge is, primarily wetland habitats. So our focus is on wetland wildlife. Fish and Wildlife Service is very focused on migratory birds. So birds are kind of obviously a big part of what we do. So not just waterfowl, but we're kind of known in the area with like the birding community or folks who are into the wildlife side of things as a kind of important area for marsh birds. Mm-hmm. So black terns, rails, American bittern, least bittern, coots, gallinules, those kind of birds. And so we've got a lot of good habitat. Fortunately, if you have a lot of good waterfowl habitat, at least at this latitude, you tend to have good marsh bird habitat.
Too, yeah.
So it's kind of nice for both those things. So we've got those. When you're a refuge biologist, you generally tend to be a jack of all trades. Mm-hmm. These things sort of come and go. Some bats are important for a while. Like right now, we're doing a lot of bat work, a lot of pollinator work, stuff like that. I just talked to you earlier. We're doing a cerulean warbler project that we're helping out on. So that takes up part of the time that you have to spend on the landscape or wherever.
And for the listeners who may not know what a cerulean warbler is, and I've actually myself done some work with occupancy modeling of cerulean warblers at Howland's Island and state land over at Montezuma. Little blue and white striped bird is an easy way to say it. Kind of hangs out at the treetop like most warblers. Goes to South America, Central and South America during winter. Yep. And then comes back through here, but has had population declines to some extent too.
Yep. So. For the most part, like a lot of the songbirds, unfortunately. But they're a tiny little bird. They're one of the smallest warblers we even have. I mean, they're really they weigh a little between 9 and 10 grams. I mean, that's a tiny bird.
What's crazy is where you find them. You find a lot of them. So like Montezuma, like at Howland's Island there, and Montezuma has like 55 points. And occupancy during late May and June is like 90%. Like the place is just covered, absolutely covered with them. And people who have never heard one before or seen one go there, and I'm like, there's 6 of them right here. Like, this is nuts. Yep. So we're going to stop talking about dicky birds because we're losing listeners as we go here because of the focus of this. But for those who are not familiar with our region here or Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge, just a little background on some of the history of land use around the refuge, and maybe and then we'll get into the restoration and enhancement of wetland habitat that y'all have done here.
Okay.
So a little background on what Alabama Swamp seems like a very weird name for Western New York.
Yeah, but it is. Yeah, so this area that the refuge is in is kind of known locally as the Alabama Swamps. There's a small community out here in Genesee County, New York, which is called Alabama. That's the name of it. So that's the closest community to the swamps. So this area, historically, pre-European settlement, would have been almost all wetland, forested wetland primarily, but interspersed with a lot of cattail marsh, a lot of emergent marsh. Back then, there would have been more beavers as well, so there have been more beaver swamps, beaver meadows, that kind of thing. So once Europeans started settling the area, they tried to, agriculture was a big thing, still is a big thing out here. They tried to drain the swamps, tried to get most of the water out of here to make it more productive for agriculture. And to some degree, they were successful, but not completely. So back in the 1950s, the Fish and Wildlife Service took an interest in the area. New York State DEC also already had a presence out here with the Oak Orchard Wildlife Management Area. So that area, interestingly, some of that land was actually owned by private individuals who used to farm muskrats out here. So they actually had a whole dike levee system with water control storage, kind of the stuff that we do, only as private property. And there was one small hunt club that used to be what was Swallow Hollow Club, which was is now part of the Refuge. So that was one of the first wetlands that was actually here prior to the Refuge being here. So in the 50s, 1958, they established what was then the Oak Orchard National Wildlife Refuge, but it was confusing because that had the same name as the Wildlife Management
state
Area.
land.
So they changed it a few years later to the Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge. And so, like I said, they hadn't completely drained the area, but historically this area would flood out in the springtime, and then the water would recede, and then once they started draining it, it would recede faster, and it would be a lot drier. So essentially what the service came in and did was replace or create infrastructure so we could maintain water levels, throughout the year, at least in certain areas. So dikes, levees, water control structures. But yeah, so in most of the area is sort of surface flow water. We don't have a lot of springs. We don't do any pumping, any of that kind of stuff. Where I know they do that in many other parts of the country. But so we are kind of at the mercy of weather and rain. And of course, here we have snow melt that we can count on usually in the springtime. So our water levels generally go real high in the spring and then taper off through the summer.
And that feeds really well into the next one is, who, not just, what are your sources of funding to restore the stuff? Because you've been, even during my time here in the last 10 years, 12 years since Sarah and I have been back in New York. We're going on 13 this fall, I think. So actually the second longest place I've lived other than the house I grew up in, my hometown. But basically, who are those sources of funding? How do you get wetland restoration done here? And then so we'll go with that one at the front end, like who you partner with and how you get wetland restoration done. But then some of your infrastructure you've put in is for water type, ability to move water, store water, then move water. So maybe kind of loop that in after you talk about the partners of how you've modified that infrastructure to use that surface water that you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Iroquois Refuge, like a lot of refuges, was purchased with Migratory Bird Conservation Fund money, which, as your hunters would know, that's duck stamp dollars. So hunters are required to buy a duck stamp in order to hunt every year. That money goes into land acquisition or easement acquisition for part of the National Wildlife Refuge system. So the refuge was purchased primarily with those funds.
Okay.
Since then, as far as generally year-to-year management money, project money, salary money, that's all federal tax dollars, generally speaking. I think a lot of people get confused about Pittman Robertson money.
Right.
I don't know if you've gone over this in other podcasts before, but PR money is excise taxes on firearms, ammunition, archery equipment. That money also goes for either land acquisition or habitat management work. But that money is all distributed to the states. So the federal government actually collects the money and then distributes it to the states depending on how many hunters they have. I think there's a formula for all that. So the federal government, the refuge system doesn't get money from that, but we do from tax dollars. Everybody's paying their taxes, and so that's where our money generally comes from. Generally speaking, but we partner with other folks sometimes. Ducks Unlimited is a great example. That's probably the one group that we've partnered with the most when it comes to habitat management work. They've provided funding for stuff. They've provided engineering for stuff. We generally work together with them, even if we are providing the funding. Again, we can get some engineering usually from DU. They've got a lot of great engineers. So that's probably our number one conservation partner. We have a friends group at the refuge as well. They're a nonprofit that sort of advocates for us, also can do some funding for us, and so we work really closely with them as well. And then of course, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We're adjacent. They have management areas adjacent to us, so we're sort of sandwiched in between two wildlife management areas, and they're a great partner for us as well.
So then, let's hit on that. And I think these two questions kind of roll together. Is when there's some berms you put in, I think recently, that were to enhance your capacity for hydrological management. So what were those? And I think your big Mohawk pool, and I'm going to get these names possibly wrong, but Mohawk pool kind of sits above some of this other stuff, and so you can leave I mean, and there's some new berms there I think you
Right.
put in to be able to move water. What's been going on there?
Yeah, so back in, actually when I first started this job, I've been here 23 years. So when I first started this job around 2000, one of the very first things the refuge manager at the time told me was I needed to work on this Mohawk Pool subdivision project. And of course, I had no idea what he was talking about. But at the time, Mohawk Pool was about 1,400 acre emergent marsh. Unfortunately, it just, the way the topography was in the marsh, you had this vast area of sort of monotypic cattail that's just really, really solid cattail, too dry to really get muskrats in there to kind of make some openings within that cattail. As you know, we're shooting sort of for what we call this hemi-marsh system, which is a 50-50 mix of vegetation and water, but also very well interspersed. You don't want it all the vegetation in one half and all the water in another half, so you need interspersion. Muskrats are great at doing that. They have these eat outs, they build houses, they eat cattail, and they make these holes within the cattail stand. But if you don't have enough water, deep enough water, you can't really do that. So that was the problem there. And then another part of that same marsh kind of was deeper, and so it had a lot of open water. So those two things just don't really work well together. If you try to raise the water to flood out some cattails, well, your open water area expands, and that's really not good habitat either.
It's kind of like a tabletop thing,
right,
exactly. Like a drop off, right?
So you'll see birds in that open water, but it's still not very quality habitat. And then, of course, if you tried to lower the water to get some vegetation in the open water area, the cattail mat would expand. So anyway, this was identified, like I said, 25 years ago or longer than that. Went through several different iterations, people trying to figure out what to do. And then eventually, DU stepped up and said, hey, we'll work with you guys. And so we worked with DU. They did all the engineering. We funded most of it, and came out with this plan to do this subdivision work. So we took a 1,400 acre marsh and turned it into 3 smaller units. One of them is still a little over 900 acres, so still pretty big. But we were able to put a dike across there. That's the higher area that had most of the cattail. And now we can maintain the water in there higher because we don't have to let all that water kind of drain down the way it used to. And so we've been able to open up that monotypic cattail stand.
Now, are you just flooding that cattail, or are the muskrats doing a lot of that work for
Muskrats
you?
are doing a lot of that work for us. So it's sort of there's sort of 2 steps to that. So just by raising the water, you get both. So you get some water stress just in general on the cattail, because if you raise the water high enough, it's not going to it just isn't going to live forever. But again, these are dynamic systems. I'm sure you covered this in other, in some of your wetland management podcasts. Wetlands just don't, especially emergent marsh wetlands, they just don't stay the same. They're different almost every year.
They've changed over the years.
Exactly.
Few years I've been hunting here.
Yeah, exactly. So you get, if you have a lot of open water, you generally try to do a drawdown. You try to get vegetation to grow, but then you might have too much vegetation. So again, you raise water, you bring in muskrats come in on their own, and they make these holes in that, and it's really great habitat.
That's when students I have to work with students in my wetland wildlife classes. They're like, well, we're going to move muskrats. I'm like, no, nobody's moving muskrats. They just show up. Like, they're animals. They move around the landscape too.
For sure.
So that big Mohawk pool, that's kind of the water source for stuff kind of down below it and around it, right?
Yes.
Those are the ones that, so it was bermed up, hold water in that, and then move them into those other units. But have you ever because I've seen Mohawk pool really dry. Have you ever drawn it down completely?
So we did one year. Okay. So that subdivision project finished up in 2006, I believe. It really didn't get rolling until like 2009. So we had everything, the dikes are seeded, and we had the water kind of where we wanted it and stuff happening. So, and we've done it once since then. We've drawn it down on purpose. Some of these drought, we might talk about this a little bit later, but some of these drought years that we've been having have caused us to, it's sort of pulling our hair out a little bit because we can't control that, obviously, which that's fine. But if you're not planning for it, it's hard to know what's going to happen and to kind of get the vegetation the way you want it. So, but we did do a drawdown one year, but we didn't do that until it had kind of gotten opened up. So the muskrats had opened it up.
It's at that stage you want to draw it down to revitalize.
There's a lot of open water at that point, and we're like, well, let's pull the plug on it and open it up, get some vegetation growing, and we did. It's just because it is the highest part of that system. It's hard to fill it back up in the fall because you just don't. You need a lot.
So you must have left all the water and the other stuff around it so that you had some place for your your hunters to go. Because you got to do this trade-off, right? Because you've seen this. I mean, Oak Orchard, the state folks get beat up about dropping stuff out, but you have this balance between we need diverse vegetation, so we have diverse wildlife habitat, so we can accommodate all these different species we're focused on here. But then you also have a hunt that you do out here, and so you want to try to accommodate that, but those two things don't always coincide with each other all the time. Long term, you're meeting both of those, but on an annual basis, you might lose a little bit of space for hunters, especially if it's dry and you don't get those fall rains.
Exactly,
so.
yeah. And I think, we have a bit of a luxury here. We run a hunter check station, so we get a lot of interaction with our hunters. And so they may, if we haven't had to totally cancel the season at all, but occasionally we just don't have as many permits available. It's just the way it is. And
you had like one pool on opening day last year that I think was closed, or there were at least there were stands that were shut off.
Yeah, we were like several of those were not open. So so and that's just the way it is. And we do. I think most of the hunters appreciate that we're doing the best we can, but it's just the way the system is. I mean, it's just, it's how we got
so that, like, what are your big challenges then? Is it people? Like, because like I always tell students, I'm like, you're going to learn all this stuff, and then 90% of your time is just dealing with the public. But to what extent? Well, what are your challenges? And there's got to be a little of the human landscape.
Yeah, there's always. Too. I mean, everybody's a little different. There's different priorities. Some people don't hunt at all. Some people, want to hunt a lot. So there's always that. We're always trying to balance all that stuff together.
Right.
I wouldn't say competing users, but users with different priorities.
Right. It's a good way to say it. I like that.
Yeah, but so I think primarily, anybody you would talk to who's doing land management stuff would say they need, more time, more people, more bodies, that kind of stuff. So most of us get into this field because we have real passion for what we do, and most people would like to do more. And there's only so many hours in a day. So if you had a technician or another biologist or whatever, it'd be nice to have that. So that's one thing. Invasive species are a constant challenge. I'm sure everybody's heard about invasive species, and we beat that drum a lot. But
what's your big? What are your
there's
your
always,
big three? Do you have a big three?
There's always
here?
something new, So Phragmites is probably, at least in the wetlands right now, Phragmites is probably number one.
Yeah.
Flowering rush is one that's just started, so I don't know. They've got more of it on the state, but we just found some last year on the Refuge, so that's going to probably become a real hassle. I don't know as much. I'm not sure anybody really know. I don't know if we know as much about that and what the effects of that might be.
Right.
But it definitely does take over. So we'll see where that goes.
So I just got off the phone with Ryan Delaney. He was a guest on here, and he runs a company called Wildlife Strategies out of Arkansas. And he just got certified to drone spray. So this this is going to revolutionize wetland management in general, right? So you used to have to pretty much dewater everything to get equipment in, or if it was really remote, do backpack sprayers and stuff like that, which was very labor intensive, which you have a problem with enough people to get that work done. But yeah, these things can run, anywhere, I think, from 5 to 10 gallons at a time. The props actually push the herbicide right down on it, and so you can spot spray stuff, and it's pretty neat. I think it's going to completely change how we do things. There's a few folks around here. I think folks over in Montezuma had some.
Yep, they sprayed some last year.
So they sprayed some last year with a drone. So you guys haven't gotten into that.
We haven't done any drone spraying yet. So primarily, I've been doing mostly spraying when we do drawdowns. So trying to coincide those things together so we don't have to deal with as much water, or any water actually, that way. So but again, putting herbicide on the landscape all the time is not really our ideal situation either. So finding some alternatives for some of this stuff would be better.
Well, I think Cornell University's been where I shouldn't name another university. No, it's fine. It's a joke. This is separate from my other work. So but Cornell's the authority on some of this stuff. They got the beetle for killing
purple loosestrife.
Purple loosestrife, and I mean, used to drive the interstate, and it used to just be a sea of purple on either side, and now it's just completely predator-prey relationship, ebb and flow of those, and it's basically loosestrife's not even a problem. You used to not be able to do a drawdown. Remember that?
Right. Yeah.
Because you do a drawdown, and the whole thing would turn purple, and you would have no plant diversity. And now nobody even worries. It's actually made habitat management possible, right?
Yeah.
But Cornell's working on there's a borer for the Phragmites now. So
yeah, I know they've been working on some stuff,
and they're doing releases of it. Here's the thing: what is it? EPA can't pass it here, but they're releasing it in Canada.
Yeah, I'd read
it's
that
just going to get here on its own because there's a moth stage,
Right,
right? It's just going to fly across the St. Lawrence.
Right, exactly.
We're going to find it. It's going to be controlling frag before EPA even approves it here, probably.
Yeah, I'd read that too, that they were releasing it in Canada.
Yeah, I'm always amazed. Like, there's stuff that Canadians, like Ontario has a dove season.
Right.
And we just, I don't know we in New York would gain that many hunters from it. It would probably just cause more of an uproar from antis. But in Canada, it just like blew right through. Like nobody even sneezed at it.
Yeah,
so.
it's weird. Yeah, I think New York might be only one of a couple of states in the country that don't have a dove season, if I'm not mistaken. There's not many.
Texas shoots like 11.6 million of them a year. It's insane. Everything's bigger in Texas.
That's right.
So you run a really nice hunt management system here. I've been involved in it. Can you tell the listeners kind of how that generally functions throughout the year? Just the like the basics of how it's run and how I guess success rates too out here. Yeah.
So our hunt program's kind of a two-stage setup. We of course in New York State we have a split season, so we have an early season or a first split and a second split.
Yep.
Generally around here, that first split is in October into a little bit of November, sometimes longer. This year it's going to be a little earlier in October and kind of closing right at the beginning of November. And then the second split historically used to start in late November. I think maybe this year it's starting in December and going a little bit later into January. So anyway, for the first split, we have about, like I told you earlier, we hunt 3 days a week, half days. So we hunt Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The way the first split has been working out the last several years, and it's going to this year as well. There's going to be 10 Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays that fall within the first split. So for those days, we actually run a waterfowl check station. For the opening day and the second Saturday, because opening day these days is always on a Saturday.
Yep.
So essentially the first two Saturdays, it's a online preseason lottery. So you have to get online. You can get all that information is available on our website. You get online, you put in for your name ahead of time, and then we do a preseason lottery, or the company we work with does a preseason lottery for opening day and the second Saturday. The other days during the first split, it's actually just a 5 a.m. Show up at the Refuge check station, get a chip. You get your number in a can like everybody else. We pull them out one at a time, and whoever gets in. And most of the time, everybody gets in, except maybe for the first Tuesday, first Thursday. Sometimes those are a little bit overdrawn, but for the most part, other than the two lottery days, obviously those are full as well. So.
I always thought that first Tuesday was like 100 parties for 30 positions.
Yeah, we've had. So we allow 3 people per permit. So we've had. I think the most we've ever had on the first Tuesday was like 120 people, and we can at full capacity, if everybody's 2 or 3 people per permit, if everybody brings a buddy or two.
Right.
If we have everything open, we're probably pushing 90-ish. We can accommodate up to about 90 people. Okay. So that year, that was crazy. There was, we had way more people than we had spots for on that. But normally we have maybe a couple more people, but otherwise we don't. So so anyway, we do so for the second split, it's a little bit different. It's all online. Yep. It's kind of first come, first serve sort of thing.
So you just log on at a certain time and then put your particulars in.
We each, so everything kind of goes live a couple of days before the hunt day. Again, we still only hunt Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays.
Yep.
But
you're good. I can edit. It's fine.
Truck windows down. My work truck? Yeah. Sorry. Can you close? No, that's fine. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Oh, is it pouring?
It is.
Yeah. Hey, at least we're getting.
There's some thunder that went through.
Yeah, I need it at our. I've got. So we put in about, I don't know, it's probably only like 3 acres of food plots, but it's enough. Like everything around us last year was soybeans, so they wouldn't bother with my soybeans that we planted, but they're right in front of Sarah's stand and they were gorgeous. Oh, cool. And then what happened was they harvested all the soybeans, and this was like a week or 2 before the rut, and all the does in first year deer came in, because those were the only beans left around, and then all the bucks came in behind them, and we both shot nice bucks last year out there. It was awesome. But I went from, I usually just compact tractor, use drags, and so I have a box tiller till, then I run drags deep, and I hand broadcast soybeans, and then I just run the drags back over them. But you waste like so much seed that way. There's just tons of stuff sitting on the surface.
Right.
So I got a single row push planter. Because I had this idea, I've like the whole matrix of like, I got strips of corn, like squares of corn, but then there's like an opening so that from my stand, there's like shooting lanes through it and everything. So it's like all really thought out. Because last year, everything worked out so well with the food plots, and we actually got on big bucks. I was like, okay, now I put too much energy into it. We're gonna shoot anything probably,
of course
right?
Not.
But okay, yeah, we were on the hunt management stuff.
So anyway, the second split is for online, first come, first serve.
Yep.
And so there's maps online. When you get your permit, it comes with a map, tells you where everything is, and obviously we're available if people have questions. I'm more than happy to talk to folks. But and then you just sort of you show up the morning of your hunt. You park in your designated parking area. You either walk to your spot or you canoe to it, depending upon which kind of a permit you got. And you're kind of on your own, and you hunt till noon. Take off, go home, or as you're going home, you either drop your harvest report into. We have a box that you can put it into, or you can mail it, or you email it to us online.
Okay.
So generally speaking, that's but for the first split, harvest reports always get dropped off in the box.
Right. The second one is you log back on and you check out.
Yeah. Not online because we don't have that feature on our particular.
Okay.
Well, Montezuma does.
Montezuma
we don't
does.
have that one.
Okay.
So ours you can just shoot me a picture. Email me a picture of your harvest report or whatever.
That's great.
Or scan it or however you want to get it to us.
So the one thing you guys do too, when you show up at like 5 a.m. or whenever the draw time is, it's an hour and a half before shooting or 2 hours?
Yeah, generally it depends on the time of day or the
Right.
time of year, I should say,
Right.
because but generally 5 o'clock is, other than maybe that first day after we turn the clocks back in the fall, that gets a little bit dicey. But for the most part, you got plenty of time to get to your stand.
But what I like is last year you had pictures of all the different holes, what they look like, and then on the board you keep a tally of like all the hunters and the kill per blind.
Yep.
But also comments like there's a small opening, or you're going to need a dog stand, or there's Bidens, which are these things that stick for people that don't have them.
Right.
They're horrible and they stick in your dog. And like, so people who have dogs avoid. I bought goggles for my dog.
Right.
And she loves them. Like, it's amazing how good they are. She won't wear them like around the house. She rips them right off. But if she's hunting and focused, like
nice.
It's pretty neat. And we bought them because when we hunt here, we've had issues. We've been at the vet several times to get things extracted from eyes. But I think hunters really appreciate that level of detail you guys put in, because it does help with decision making when you're looking at the entire board.
Yeah, I think it gives people an idea. Some people get a little too focused on it, especially the seasonal tallies.
The harvest stuff.
Yeah, because it gets you got to look at the daily. We also have a daily sheet that's out available for folks to kind of flip through, because some particular stand might have been really great at the beginning of the season, but if it hasn't been produced in the last couple of days, you may want to avoid that one. So it's just you got to look at it all sort of together.
Well, and so much of it is like who's hunting it too. There is some of that.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
So I don't know if Mickey Heitmeyer listens to this, but he was kind of a legend around Duck Creek in Missouri, Puxico, Missouri, and he actually it was so funny, he ran a little biscuit shop, like breakfast sausage and all that stuff, and with his family right next to where the draw was.
Nice. It's good.
And he's doing wetland consulting and stuff. He does a lot of science consulting and things over the years. I respect Mickey a lot. He's kind of done his own thing over the years. But you could see zeros across the board, like in the timber, and then 6, and then zeros, and then 6. But because that guy knew every single hole and exactly how to shoot it, and other people would go in and not get anything, and it was like timing and how you set up. And so there's probably some of that here, like the folks that come back and back and back really learn this place and get a feel for it. But the one thing I've noticed, Paul, is it changes so much each year. And you only get to hunt 3 days a week, and you don't always get in. So it tends to be like a kind of a hard place to become an expert at, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, you've hunted it a fair bit too, right?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I mean, so we didn't mention yet, but we have sort of 2 different stands, if you will, or permits. We have walk-in stands that you actually have to hunt at a marker. So there's a numbered marker, a post there, and you have to hunt within 100 feet of that.
Yep.
And so there's usually some cattail or some buttonbush or some kind of a vegetation that you can, natural vegetation you can hide in. You're more than welcome to bring in some burlap or whatever you want to put up on a couple of conduits. Whatever. It's usually hiding's not a big issue.
Right.
And then we have a few permits that we call our free roam area, where you actually put a canoe in and you have to paddle, down a canal or a borrow ditch or whatever you want to call it, and you have to get into the hunt area. And then once you're in the hunt area, you can go wherever you want.
Right.
So. Put your decoys in a particular spot, the birds are landing somewhere else, you can pick up and move to the other spot. And so those areas, tend to be our most successful, I guess, if you will. The highest harvest rates come from that free roam area.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. One of them is it's that area we were talking about earlier that we subdivided and got where it used to be a lot of solid cattail, and now it's really nice hemi-marsh. It's also quite large. It's almost 1,000 acres. We only allow at the most seven parties to hunt in there, which
it's
is
1,000 acres.
Yeah,
well, almost 1,000.
Yeah. So I mean, some of that's going to be still be solid cattail that's really unhuntable, but for the most part, most of it's huntable. But we try to keep it pretty light as far as because birds are actually in there a lot, just loafing and roosting and stuff like that. So we don't want them necessarily. The goal isn't to blow all the birds out of here. I mean, our number one priority is still wildlife habitat.
Wildlife habitat and hold birds. So this comes back to the part 4 of the wetland management series that you said you hadn't listened to yet, but that's like one party per 100 acres or maybe 110, 120 acres. And this is what I tell folks: if you want to hold birds in a place and have good shooting, go one party per 100. You're going to have the same bird per hunter average probably at one party per 50 acres, but you're not going to hold birds, and you're probably going to take longer to shoot your birds. It's going to be a little more difficult at that concentration. But that one party per 100 acres seems like the magic number. And there was a year at one of the units in Montezuma, it's 300 acres, and they put 3 parties in by mistake that year. They didn't put 6 in. And you could have a big flock of 50 to 100 mallards work and go land somewhere, not come into you and go land somewhere, and then later on have a pair come by, shoot the drake, and because parties were so spread out, those birds wouldn't leave. And there was also good food there.
Right.
But that's like the coolest thing is like when you can actually have quality hunting in a marsh and hold birds. You're actually doing the 2 things that you really want to do here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I actually throw out the idea all the time. I'm like, I feel like you could hunt an entire refuge. Like some places say we're only going to hunt 25%, right? I'm like, you could hunt the whole thing, just at really low densities, have a really cool hunt, and serve your birds maybe. It's like nobody ever wants to make that leap to go, like, do that thing, even in an experimental framework. How many do you hunt? The whole refuge, or how much area do you have that you leave as like full-blown refuge?
Well, so it's a little bit, it's kind of complicated, but so if you buy any refuge that's purchased with duck stamp dollars, you're only allowed to hunt 40% of that refuge. It's called the 40% rule.
Okay.
So you're only allowed waterfowl hunt, I should say.
Right.
Or sorry, migratory bird hunting. It's not just waterfowl. It includes woodcock and stuff like that. So, so you're only allowed to hunt 40%. We're a little bit below that. So, our larger managed marshes, we hunt most of those, and then we've got a lot of natural marsh and some smaller, what I sort of call upland marshes, which are ditch plug marshes, which are generally smaller, but a fair number of birds as well, which we don't hunt. Like those areas are sort of off limits, and so, and again, it's a pretty controlled hunt. Again, we hunt only 3 days a week, so we tend to hold birds pretty well through the season. Like I said, we discussed earlier, even though our harvest numbers do tend to taper off, our hunter numbers do as well. So some of that is just because there's aren't as many people hunting later in the season as well.
People move on to
they got other stuff going on.
Yep. Deer rut's the biggest thing that probably pulls people out. It stops me from going.
Absolutely.
Right? And getting up that early every single day too.
It
kind of starts to wear you out.
You have a history of saying some derogatory things about deer hunting on your podcast, as I recall. So.
No one should listen to the episode called "I Make Gumbo." I had somebody, a guy I talked to the other day. He had a wetland management question, and we chatted for a bit. Really nice fellow from Wisconsin, and he's like, "I've been working my way back through all your podcasts from the beginning towards the end." And I'm like, just so you're aware, we've refined it as we've gone along. So, it's gotten a little bit better, I would say. So, but I appreciate that, Paul. That's fun. So how many, with this opening day hunt, your success rate's pretty high. Like usually when we were talking before, like my wife, when I were in here, it was because there were so many pintails and we couldn't shoot more than one. We ended up with 9 birds, but it was still an amazing hunt. But like your bird per hunter average type thing that you're getting?
So I think on average, across the whole season, at least the first split, that's where we have the best data for, and that's what we have the longest term data for. I think we're usually, more recently, we're kind of in the 2.5-ish to almost 3 birds per hunter, depending on the year. And that has increased like 1 bird per hunter almost a full bird per hunter since we did that subdivision project
Oh,
we
cool.
talked about
Yeah, yeah.
recently, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's actually a lot of ducks overall. And that's just a lot of better hunting, I should say. I mean, as far as total numbers of birds, it's probably not that big a deal, but it just shows that there's a lot more opportunity for that habitat work that we did with our partners. So that was very
Yeah, those enhancements make huge differences. We were actually putting out, it's called an eddy covariance, eddy flux. It measures carbon and methane. So we were putting one out in Hidden Marsh at Montezuma, which is not a huntable area, so I can talk about it right now. But that's a new one, and it's 400 acres, 380 acres, something like that. But the marsh birds out there, insane. Like Virginia rails, I'm like, there must be 400 Virginia rails in here. There's like a Virginia rail per acre. And that's so cool because it just seems like as you build it, they will come. Like there's actually more and more critters in there, and the rats are starting to eat it out. I mean, it's gonna be, if they do end up hunting it, it's gonna be a pretty cool spot.
Yeah.
But that's pretty good because like Missouri shoots for like a 3 bird per hunter average, right? And anytime you can get a 3 bird per hunter average, I think you're doing pretty darn well. So, but applicants wise, this is always the funny one, and I, Paul and I joke about this all the time. Is my wife Sarah and I mean, we've applied like 6 times or 7 times for opener and gotten in like 5.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And you're like, we should probably be playing the lottery because how many applicants do you get for those first few days?
Yeah, so I think last year was the most we've ever gotten, and that was 450
for 25 to 30 spots.
Yeah, so it changes each year. So the way the system works, we kind of have to know ahead of time how many people are going to draw before we even know how many stands we have. So I tend to be a little conservative and try. I don't want to end up with more hunters than have stands, especially on opening day. That would be not good. So, so we tend to err on the side of conservative and about 25-ish spots. There will be usually more spots than that on opening day, so we actually do a little standby draw, and some of the hunters have sort of gotten used to that over the last several years. But yeah, so for opening day, there's like 25 spots. For the next Saturday, there's 25 spots. So we'll get 450 people applying for 50
spots.
Stands.
Yeah, and I think at one point it was like 3 years in a row.
Yeah,
we got in, and I'm doing the math on it. I'm like, I should just play the lottery.
Right.
I can't. I do because I don't have a good retirement plan. So the lottery is my. And in New York, your lottery money goes into the education system. Right. So as an educator myself, I'm like, whatever, $2 every time it gets over 200 million.
Yeah, there you go.
Because what? I wouldn't know what to do with 10 million, so I don't play when it's 10.
Right, exactly.
But I have friends out here that also hunt here that never get in, and then they text me when the emails start going out as to whether you got in. And I get in, and I'm like, I know they didn't. And I'm like, I don't even want to reply to them anymore. I mean, there's a whole conspiracy theory that because you and I know each other somehow, you're just putting me in there. Sarah thinks somehow it picks women because she usually gets in. She's like, maybe it's set to like bias towards women, so women get out and hunt. I'm like, no, it's literally just a random draw. Please, to the listeners, tell everybody it's a random draw.
It's out of my hands, actually. That's all done by a private company that takes care of all that. So yeah, at this point. So, but
there you go.
And if I were gaming the system, I'd be hunting opening day, and I've never hunted here opening day. So I've worked here for 23 years. So.
Yeah. You actually hunt. Do you put in for opener?
I don't.
You don't.
I have a couple friends who do.
Good for you.
But it's just there's just so few stands that I'm just not real comfortable doing that. I mean, I could, but it's just I choose not to.
And you have other places you go anyway.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of friends who they've been putting in for several years. They've never got drawn for opening day. They have got drawn for the second Saturday. So I have hunted here on the second Saturday a few times. But yeah, I can hunt the refuge as long as I'm going through the same rules that everybody else follows. Yep. I usually will hunt on a non-lottery day, so it's just a day where you come and show up at 5 o'clock. So I stand on the hunter side of the table and get my chip like everybody else, and take my chances like everybody else. So
yeah, that builds respect with your clientele too, I think.
Yeah, I think most of the
and not be in the line every day. Sometimes be on the work side of the desk.
I'm generally there quite a lot as well. So
this place seems pretty consistent duck migration wise. But how many years have you been here now?
23.
23. Yeah. Long enough time to see any shifts in weather? I mean, I feel like in the last 15 years, it's just the December, Januaries are like that's where the bulk of the mallards are now, and they should be in like Maryland by that time, like what they used to be. Is your sense that have you seen that through time, a shift in migration patterns? You think?
Yeah, I think for sure. I feel like couple of different things, sort of across the whole year. I feel like we get more birds in the fall than we used to, but maybe less birds in the spring, at least for geese especially, I guess. I'm talking about geese primarily, but we were talking about pintails earlier, like bigger numbers of pintails here before the season. Historically, I feel like we used to always get a big push of pintails in the springtime during spring migration. We still do, but I didn't feel like we got quite as many pintails in the fall as we do now. So I don't know. I mean, so the hunter in me, like when I'm out hunting, sees what I see.
Right.
Each day I go hunting, and I'm making inferences on that little snapshot in time and space. The biologist in me realizes that that's probably not real good science. So, I'm always this push and pull because
struggling with that.
Yeah,
right?
because it just doesn't. What you see on a certain day, or even if you hunt 30 days a season, you're only in one small spot each day.
Right.
So yeah, you can compare it to your own experiences, seasons before, but I don't know. Because I'm a scientist, I guess I need, you kind of have to do things that's sort of sciencey, as you're well aware. So, but anyway, I do feel like there are some changes. I feel like birds are generally staying here longer. We certainly don't get the ice that we used to. I mean, I do muskrat house surveys on ice, and some years I can't even get out. We do a great blue heron nest survey in the wintertime, and that's in a flooded woodland. Again, without ice, we really can't, and snow actually, we can't really get in there to do that. So there's been years more recently where I'm just not getting out to do that stuff, or can't get out to do it.
I actually find that because it's not like the typical winter that I grew up with as a kid, and all your lifestyle culture, ice fishing, these different types of things like, hey, I can check wood duck boxes or clean them out on the ice.
Right.
It actually, because you had a set way to do things with nasty weather that you were ready for, it's actually worse when it's warmer.
Right.
That's what I find. I'm like, I would just rather have an actual traditional, quote unquote, traditional winter where it gets cold and stays cold than this back and forth stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I love to ice fish, so that's another thing I miss. I got out once last year, and I think once the year before.
I went once on Oneida Lake, and then we went up in the Adirondack Mountains for a weekend trip, and that was it.
But I think so as we discussed earlier, I think we're still losing our birds because we don't have a large open water area near us that they can go to and then come immediately back. So all it takes is like 3 days of ice, and then they're gone. But we get these thaws, and so there just doesn't seem to be open water a lot in the wintertime. And again, that's just, I'm sure we'll have hard winters again, but overall,
I think we're going to get one coming. I really do. This La Nina thing's tuning up to be pretty decent. I would even say, like, rewatering this fall shouldn't be as hard. And I know this freaks people out. It does produce habitat for ducks. And one of the things that we get more like a mid-coast tropical storm, but that transition from El Nino to La Nina, the hurricane season's probably going to be pretty crazy this year, so people should be prepared for that. I know people don't like to hear it, but there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not making hurricanes, right? But when we get those systems that come in, and sometimes we'll get them in October, and it'll drop like 2, 3, 4 inches of rain in like a 1 day, 2 day period, and those are some of the best years when we get real dry and hot in the summer, and you get all that annual plant growth and revitalize the perennial community. And then you think you're going to have a hard time rewatering, and then it all happens at once, like right either before beginning of season or maybe like the second. I always like it to happen in like the second week because I tend to be able to sneak out during the week and hunt, and so I want the opening day people. Actually, I want everybody to have a good hunt, honestly, but it just makes space for me to be able to react to that new water, and when the birds react to it, So
yeah, sometimes that could be too much of a good thing because you get a lot of sheet water in some of the fields around, and a lot of the birds will sort of leave the refuge area, especially if we've had decent water all along. If we're watering up just like everybody else, then we probably usually have some pretty good food, so that's going to draw birds in.
Do you guys think you get so much pressure that you push birds off of here ever, or do you think there's places for them, nooks and crannies, to get away and they stay here?
I mean, I think there's certainly places for them to stay, but again, if we happen to do a drawdown in an area that gets hunted, there might be enough pressure to push them at least away, or maybe they're just not very active during the day, but they're out, they're loafing somewhere else. We certainly have lots of water on the refuge that ducks can go to during the day and be there weren't any hunters around.
Right.
So I don't know. I think maybe some birds leave because there's pressure. I think that, but also some birds are just leaving because that's what they do in the fall.
Right,
they're
it's a
moving
timing.
on, they just go.
The little bit of pressure might give them that extra nudge to go. But the one thing we haven't covered is, and I talk about this a little bit in the management series, is it seems like places that don't have a lot of food, the birds can't take as much pressure and they don't want to be there as much, and the hunting declines quicker. But when you've got, like, there's some stuff that they just really want to be in, you can hunt it more often and heavier and still hold those birds.
Sure.
So, like, what are those when you're aiming for a plant community out there? And let's forget about marsh birds. Like, let's just say let's just go with duck food for now, right? Like, what can you get to grow here, and what do you kind of try to aim to grow? I don't think we really scratched that yet.
Yeah, I don't think we haven't talked about it too much. So again, we're so the hemi-marsh thing we talked about a little bit earlier. In order to get that, you need to do these drawdowns, and so what we do, essentially, that's mimicking a natural drought. So what we do is we lower the water sort of gradually in the springtime, and the slower you can do it, the more diverse vegetation you're going to get, generally speaking. So over a period of weeks, we'll sort of drain the marsh down, and it's kind of cool because actually, if it's still during spring migration, a lot of the ducks will actually take advantage of that because you're sort of concentrating a lot of invertebrates into a much smaller space than where they were originally. And of course, in the springtime, as you know, ducks are feeding heavily on invertebrates, especially hens. So they need that protein source. And so, but also, I know we're supposed to just be talking about ducks, but also things like wading birds and stuff like that. Shorebirds are just, they love when
herons,
you do it. Yeah, exactly. You're concentrating fish, frogs, whatever, you're concentrating all kinds of bugs for shorebirds. So it really feeds the whole suite of birds that you find in the wetlands. So anyway, once it dries out, stuff starts to germinate, and we're not necessarily shooting for any particular thing. I just like a diversity of things. So some of your bigger seed stuff like smartweed and millets, barnyard grass, that kind of stuff. We'll also get, we talked about earlier, Bidens, or whatever you want to call them, devil's pitchforks or stick tights, beggar sticks, whatever.
It's ruined more than one.
Right, yeah, the things you hate on your neoprene waders, but ducks happen to love. So hunters are funny because once you explain to them that ducks actually love to eat those things, they tend to warm up to them a little bit more than they would have otherwise.
I'm kind of in between. Right? I'm just,
So that's a good duck food, and then some of the smaller seed stuff like panicum, panic grass, which is a marsh species, which some of your smaller seed birds, your teal and your pintails and stuff like that.
What perennial, more like perennials, like water plantain and Sagittaria and like arrowhead, bulrushes. Like that's going to be burreed is a good one. Yeah, it actually puts out sometimes looks like a kernel of corn sometimes.
Yeah, they're huge.
That's more in your hemi-marsh type stuff most of the time.
Yeah, and we also have buttonbush if you want to get into the shrub layer, and actually swamp white oak into some of our forested wetlands, so they'll feed wood ducks.
Because you've got some wood ducky spots.
Yeah,
quite a bit for sure too. So we've talked a lot about the hunt management. So I was going to ask you, what's the most challenging thing with the public, but I'm actually going to not even bother with that because that just sounds like complaining about the public. So what is the most rewarding thing you feel like dealing with the public, and maybe on the hunter side and the non-hunter side at the refuge?
Yeah, it's sort of a two-part answer. I really like to see the birds using these areas in the fall. So it's, there's a sort of an old saying, refuge managers or refuge biologists are duck farmers. Like that's just back in the day when it was all about waterfowl. That's just what they were. I'm just a duck farmer. That's what I'm doing. And really, that's all we're really doing. We're trying to manage habitat, grow something in these wetlands that'll feed birds on their. Generally here, it's during migration, and so it's very, very enjoyable when I can go out and I can see birds actually using this vegetation after we reflood it in the fall, and then. On top of that, it's also even better watching people enjoy those birds, whether they just be viewing them through binoculars, taking pictures, or shooting them on a hunt day.
Yep.
So that's just, I really appreciate that. And it's really great when you're working the check station and you get a harvest report at the end of the day and just a nice thanks or, really appreciate what you guys are doing.
I try to shoot you an email
and
say,
yeah, exactly. And you'd be amazed. I mean, a lot of
yeah.
people actually do take the time to put a little note on there and just say, hey, really, thanks a lot, really appreciate that. So that's always great. I really enjoy that.
That is fun, and I mean, as a public servant yourself, seeing you, like when Sarah and I would show up and we usually stay in town. It's 2 hours from home almost, right? So rather than get up basically right after we go to bed, we come and stay overnight, sneak a dog into a hotel. There's not a hotel here that takes a dog, by the way. Sneak a dog into a hotel, which has been done pretty much
lots of times
all across the northern tier states as we travel to Montana and back. But we will come out in the evening and hike around a little bit on the state and drive around where we're allowed to and look at stuff. And what's really cool is running into you. Like, you're actually out there, you know, checking stuff out for one last time. And then we're not the only ones looking and scouting. I'm guessing other people kind of come and get a feel for it. I mean, we could just call you, which is cool too. Like, you'll tell us. Right. It's like, it's not a secret, like what the different holes look like this year, what the water levels are like. So you don't show up at the draw and then have no idea where you're going to go, right? Yeah. There's always like that scrawled piece of paper, and you're watching blinds disappear, and you're like, start getting angry, right? Well, what's realistic on opening day is, from what I've seen, it doesn't matter that much. Most spots are prepped well enough that, and you're not putting posts in places where people aren't going to see birds either. Like, you'll close them if you need to.
Yeah, usually cool. If we don't have enough water, we'll shut something. I mean, certainly some areas are better than others. That's the same everywhere. But we try not to put somebody out in a spot where they're not going to see any birds. Now, whether they can call them in and shoot them, that's up to them. But you're going to see some ducks, and you're going to have some opportunities, and that's generally what we're shooting for.
So if you had like a magic wand for conservation, and maybe thinking about the Northeast more so, since that's your kind of wheelhouse and what you're familiar with nowadays, like, what would you change that would kind of really help duck conservation, you know, duck management, maybe even in duck hunters themselves, but like, what would that be across the Northeast U.S.?
I think that's a pretty easy answer for me. I think we just stop wetland destruction. I mean, I think wetlands are still being drained, you know, across the whole country, across the whole world, at a rate that's unsustainable.
Have you seen the new wetland status report that came out?
I have not seen that yet.
I'm gonna send it to you. It's pretty depressing.
I'll bet. Yeah,
it is. Like, we're going the wrong direction again. Like, we were doing well for a while, and this is not. That was like George Bush Senior era, like no net loss stuff. We gained. And this isn't a political comment at all, because both parties have been in office and it's just been going down. So there's some strong pressures now. Yeah. I mean, we have an increasing population. So we have a standard of living that we like to maintain, you know, here, and it puts a lot of pressure on habitat, and so wetlands are getting squeezed out all the time. They're getting drained for lots of different reasons, and it's just unsustainable, unfortunately. Yeah, and wetland protection laws are slipping the wrong way too, right? Like, Clean Water Act kind of got gutted, and I tell duck hunters all the time, I'm like, I think the environment's universal, right? Like, NOC, a North American Wetlands Conservation Act, it has bipartisan support, right? Yeah. There's stuff about the environment that everybody's for, and wetlands, really, to a large degree, seem to be one of them. So I always say to folks, I'm like, you should just vote like ducks' lives depend on it, because they do, right?
Exactly.
And so I actually vote a lot on that kind of like, what do you stand for this like larger kind of conservation ethic? Because I think if we keep ducks with us, like, duck habitat's human habitat too. Like, those things kind of go hand in hand, right? So, sure. That's a good one, Paul. I like that. I mean, all this stuff comes back to habitat. You know, it really does. And so, you guys are doing a really good job of it here. Are you still acquiring any new stuff, or are you just enhancing what you have?
Yeah, just enhancing what we have. We don't have a larger acquisition boundary than what our refuge boundary actually is.
Okay, because some of them do. Like, Montezuma still has that large region.
Some refuges are still active.
Yeah, and as soon as it's almost like it's kind of like a rectangle of, it's state on either side and you in the middle, and then it's Lake Plain of Lake Ontario. It's pretty. Right. It's pretty flat, pretty heavily farmed, not a lot of trees. So this is important for these birds as they stop over. And if you guys didn't exist and you didn't do such a good job with managing it, Western New York would be worse off for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, and it's nice that we're in a complex with the two state management areas as well, and our management systems sort of complement one another. So it's nice that we try to put a mosaic of different wetland types on the landscape, and the DEC does as well. And we generally don't get into each other's management strategies, but we do keep track. Hey, what are you drawing down this year? Here's what we're drawing down. Let's just kind of see how.
Yeah, like what's missing. What can I provide
right,
that
exactly.
you're not providing?
And what maybe hey, is there a new invasive species you're seeing, or are you doing something different, or maybe there's some sort of wildlife thing going on? And we fortunately, DEC has an office right here in our building, so we're constantly talking to those folks.
Great communication. That makes it a lot easier when you can have lunch.
Yeah, my office is
somebody.
literally right next to the state biologist's office. So that's great.
That's awesome. Yeah. So really appreciate you being here, Paul. And I don't think this will be the last time. I might just get you on like a Zoom and be like, hey, how's migration going?
Yeah, anytime.
I'm thinking about doing these like little short, like snippet type interviews. And as after this, keep listening to podcasts because we're getting South Dakota, fella from South Dakota, and I'm trying to get Mike Zemansky from, he's the waterfall biologist for North Dakota, when they're done with their waterfall survey to give kind of an update of what those conditions look like. So that's going to be of interest to a lot of folks. We're pretty stable here in the east in general, but we still derive ducks from the prairies too. It's not like we don't get any of them. So
yeah.
But yeah, I really appreciate all your efforts and applaud what you've done as a biologist. And I think that what's cool too is for the we get a lot of students that listen to this, wildlife students. Is for those folks, I will say this: you can be successful and happy with your career, right, Paul?
Right,
as a wildlife biologist,
yeah,
and it's not all about the money. And there's a lot to be said to be so satisfied that I'm guessing you get up in the morning sometimes for work for what you're doing, and you're not like dragging your feet like I got to go to work. You literally you almost can't sleep. It's it's like a hunt day. You want to come to work so bad.
Yeah, this is a great job. I'm getting older now. Retirement's sort of on the horizon, getting closer all the time. But at the same time, I always say, well, I don't really have to retire. I mean, I like coming to work every day. So,
right, and it's healthy.
It's
healthy work too, right?
Yeah, it's great. I get outside a lot. And that's awesome.
For sure. Were you going to take us out? Are you comfortable with it, or do you want me to do it?
Well, it's funny because any of my hunting friends who've seen me shoot would not want me saying, "May your skies be filled," and shoot straight, my friends.
Thank you, Paul. That was good.
No problem.
Appreciate it.